The day was brisk and bright when Kelan and Ruby returned to the town of Edgewall, though they found it had changed. Where there had been threads of violet mist when they last were here, now glowing rivers and brooks flow down the streets and alleys. There had been dozens of sleepers, but now the victims are beyond counting. Ruby doesn't say so, she's too brave, but Kellan knows she's taken aback as they pass dreamers leaning against balconies, hidden beneath parchment and blankets, or just standing at open windows. Kellan watches her avoiding the strands of violet, as she advises him to do the same. She can't have the hero of this story falling asleep on her. He wishes she hadn't called him that. Ruby was at least as brave as he was. Kellan thought she was a hero too. Ruby explains that her brother Peter was the hero of her family. He had raised her all on his own, and was the best hunter in town. That was a real hero to her. Kellan thought there were plenty of ways to be a hero. Peter was one, and so was Ruby. Kellan too would like to be a hero someday, and he just might be, as he's well on his way to completing his first quest. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Ether Hub. I'm Sai, bringing you more Magic the Gathering lore. Today we continue the Wilds of Eldraine story with Chapter 4. In our previous chapter, which you can find on your screen now or in the playlist linked in the video description, we went through Eldraine's wild terrain and witnessed Rowan come to a new and dark realization, that the realms could only be united through power her brother Will lacks. And power is exactly what she's promised by the witch Arit, the evil behind the Wicked Slumber. We find out that Arit is aided by the planeswalker Ashiok, who is likely using the sleeping victims to fuel their nightmare magic, all while masquerading as a simple mentor to nocturnal spellcraft. Rowan pushes concerns of evil aside and seems to jump on board with their plan, to use an army of the unwilling asleep to bring peace to the realm and keep it safe through force. Our second group of adventurers, the company led by Kellan, continue their mission to end the Wicked Slumber by killing the 3 witches responsible. 1 down, 2 to go, as Kellan and Ruby travel to find Hylda in her frozen castle. Now, we continue with Wilds of Eldraine Chapter 4, Ruby and the Frozen Heart, written by Arsenault Rivera. Remember, if you're enjoying the content here, to please support us by leaving this video a like, sharing it with friends, dropping a super thanks, and becoming a subscriber. It all goes a long way in helping the channel grow. And now, let's get back to the lore. Ruby leads Kellan to a small cabin on the edge of town whose chimney emitted a plume of applewood smoke. Kellan's stomach rumbles, and he's distracted by Ruby asking what makes a hero. He knows a hero always does the right thing. They make other people's lives better. Kellan waits for Ruby's answer, but before she can speak, her brother Peter is ushering them inside. The cabin is filled with the smell of venison steaks, and the conversation quickly turns from heroes to food and plans. Peter agrees to take them to Loch Lariant, the location of the next witch, Hylda, but on one condition. They must wear their thickest coats, and when they can no longer feel their noses, they must turn back no matter the circumstance. If they hadn't finished by then, Peter promised to go himself, as soon as his wounds had healed. He'd heard about the castle, that no hunters or bandits had managed to get inside. Even Sir Imodaine tried it and couldn't even make it across the drawbridge, even with the fire magic she used to warm her. Kellan would not turn back, not when so many people were sick. He had to end this curse. Peter pointed out that it didn't have to be him who ended this curse. A hero must know when a monster can be felled and when one cannot. What if he was right? Peter gives Ruby a bearskin to wear over her red cloak, and a wool coat to Kellan. Kellan groans, realizing the wool is from his hometown of Oranshire, but at least he knows it'll keep him warm. Before they leave on their quest, Peter takes them to the town square to see a puppet show. There are dozens of children gathered there, wearing red hoods and woolen cloaks, mimicking the puppet characters who are defeating the evil man-eating witch. Kellan thinks he sees Ruby tear up in the flickering candlelight, but he doesn't say a word. Led by Peter, they made the week-long journey from Edgewall towards Loch Lariant. As they approach the loch itself, Peter wants to stop and make camp, and who can blame him? Kellan had scarcely experienced colder days than this, and even on those days, his family had at least sheep to huddle up to keep warm. Peter again asked to make sure they didn't want him to come, but his sister Ruby insisted he still needed to recover from his wounds. When they bid him farewell, he holds them close and wishes them good fortune. Every once in a while, Ruby glances back, searching for the orange silhouette of Peter's fire, though all around them, the sky was marbled with blue, green, and violet. Beneath the lock's frozen surface, there were eerie lights bobbing and weaving, and Kellan thinks he spots a pair of yellow eyes, but they disappear a moment later. The castle's main tower stands on a cliff overlooking the lock, but there was much more to it than Kellan realized from afar. There's a never-ending series of baileys, each leading to a new gate, which open to sparkling new fortresses. There are several drawbridges to nowhere, and Kellan counts at least 5 portcullises. The road before them is paved with glittering crystal gravel, and it feels strange under Ruby and Kellan's feet. At least they didn't have to do any climbing this time. Besides, fear was nothing in the face of the greater good. They would miss their climbing expert though, Troyan, and his outlandish stories. Ruby was smart enough to know that they were made up, but Kellan thought they were enchanting stories of the Fae, not realizing that they were in fact true stories from his home plane of Ravnica. Ruby squeezes his hand, understanding how badly Kellan wanted to see more of the Fae lands. She assures him he will be the toast of the town once he completes this quest. Kellan isn't so sure about that. He had always been too Fae for humans. What if he was too human for the Fae? Talion had pointed out how little he knew of Fae customs, and he still hasn't gotten these dang basket hilts to work. Before he can think of a response, there's a woman's voice carried on the wind. It told them to turn back. Knights, bandits, and would-be kings had fallen on this path. 2 children had little hope of success. The sky darkens overhead and the wind picks up, causing them to pull their hoods up against the cold. They weren't giving up that easily. The voice warns that the brave live short lives, and that they would protect their icy realm from all threats. No matter the age of that threat, they would find no mercy here. With every word the witch Hylda speaks, the air grows colder and the wind stronger. Kellan only knows Ruby is near because of her red cloak. Surely, she could no longer feel her nose like he couldn't. He shouts over the wind, telling her that she could go back. Ruby refuses. She wasn't going to let that witch win. Hylda gives them one final warning, promising they would die if they didn't turn back. The veil of snow is so dense that Kellan can hardly see the castle, no more than a mile away. He could turn away, but if he does, no one would ever wake up, and he would never know who his true father was. This witch clearly didn't know a questing hero when she saw one. Hylda claims that heroes die like anyone else, before her voice fades into the wind, summoning creatures from within it. They hear a sound like breaking glass and see a streak of cerulean. An icy spear lands at their feet, and they realize the snow had solidified into mail and plate. A warrior of frost, twice Kellan's height, stands over them as a new spear forms in his hand. He thrusts the spear at Kellan's heart, but Ruby pulls him away. The spear tip catches on the Orangeshire wool too strong to rip. Kellan's fingers are too stiff to unclasp the cloak, and even if he left it behind, how long would he survive without it in this freezing cold? Kellan sees an axe form in the hand of the frozen warrior, and he shouts for Ruby to go on ahead. Before she can answer, another warrior forms and yanks her into the air, his frosty sword against her throat. No, this isn't how it's supposed to go. In the stories, the heroes always figure something out. Kellan didn't have any magical weapons, his mother never taught him how to wield any, and his father was never around to teach him anything. Kellan whimpers and reaches for his basket hilts, begging his father, his Fae father, for help. Gold light suddenly cuts through the snow, bright as spring, glowing from the hilts. The wood changes, and on instinct, Kellan lashes at the warriors, as his newfound sword cuts straight through the icy arm. Kellan, in his desperation, conjured a delicate blade of light from his basket hilt. Ruby's eyes are wide as he drops to the ground, cheering for Kellan. He was really doing it. He was using Fae Powers. The warriors wander away, howling with pain, leaving their weapons in the snow. Ruby picks up a sword and stands back to back with Kellan. It seems to have gotten colder. His new sword now felt heavy in his hands. A strange sleepiness creeps in, and Kellan worries that he must be cursed. But then again, there were no plumes of violet here. His eyes begin to droop as he thinks how well he's done. Maybe he deserves a nap. Now it's Kellan's turn to fall, but Ruby is there to catch him. Ruby carries Kellan through the snow. He looks fragile enough for a snowflake to break him. Her brother would have told her to go home. They had failed. maybe some other hero would come, with a heart like a furnace and blood like molten ore. A month ago, she thought life was about staying alive, looking out for you and yours. This was bigger than the two of them. The puppet show in Edgewall showed her that. All those children who wore red hoods, what would they think if she left Kellan here alone? What would Kellan say when he awoke, never having the opportunity to learn about his true father? Could she live with herself if the wicked slumber never faded away? Ruby's footsteps never felt so heavy as Hylda's voice speaks to her, pointing out that she owes Kellan nothing. Ruby knew that people didn't need to owe each other to help each other out. When she retorts, the voice grows quiet, and Ruby walks in the silent frost, each step a battle won. Hylda's voice comes back again, trying to convince her to leave Kellan behind. Then she may make it to the castle. Ruby breathes in what feels like glass. Then a strong gust sweeps her off her feet. She tumbles with Kellan, cold sapping her strength. Yet she stands, lifting her friend from the snow, determined not to leave him behind. As she trudges one foot in front of the other, she thinks Hylda must be lonely. That must be why she keeps taunting. The witch must not have anyone else to talk to. There's another strong gust, and Ruby holds Kellan tighter as she hunkers down against battering hail. Finally, after what feels like an eternity, the skeletal gates rise above her. She stands, looking at the drawbridge, the part Peter said was the most challenging. Ruby sees lumps hidden beneath the snow, bodies of hunters and bandits alike. She had promised to turn back when she couldn't feel her nose, and in truth, she hadn't been able to feel it for hours. Ruby steps onto the bridge, exposed to weather from all sides. She kept walking, though Hylda's voice told her she was a fool to continue. Maybe Ruby would die here, but she had to at least try. Hylda can't understand why Ruby would risk her life, her voice sounding upset for the first time. Ruby couldn't give up, because her friend wanted to defeat the witches and learn more about his father. She couldn't let him down. She would risk her life, because it was the right thing to do. Ruby's knees give. She can't walk anymore, but she can still crawl. Tired and clumsy, she lifts Kellan onto her back and plunges through the snow on her hands and knees. Deep down, Ruby knows this won't work, but she's trying anyway. Kellan would do the same for her. Even if she passes out, even if the snow takes her, maybe Kellan's Fae blood would help him survive somehow. Maybe he would make it to the castle and get answers to his questions. Ruby reaches out, surprised to find an outstretched hand, a crystal bracelet around the wrist. It's the witch, Hylda, promising that she means no harm. Hylda promises to prove it as she kneels down next to Ruby. Ruby is surprised to see how sad she looks. No snow-white finery or icy crown could conceal her loneliness. Suddenly, the weather around them clears to a gentle snowfall. Hylda leans over the children and kisses their foreheads, welcoming them to winter's home. Magic tingles over Ruby's skin and her eyes begin to lose focus. The witch promises to keep them safe. Ruby was right about her, she was lonely. She'd even forgotten how lonely she was until Ruby showed her what she had forsaken all this time. As Ruby's vision starts to fade, Hylda bids her to sleep, and that they would have the truth when they wake. Kellan and Ruby wake hours later in a room of glistening ice. Two cold golems guard their slumber, and before them is a morning banquet presented on a crystal tray. Kellan reaches out from under the piles of blankets, going for the hearty soup, but Ruby stays his hand. The witch suddenly rises from a chair across the room, claiming again that she means no harm. Ruby wasn't sure if this was a trick. Maybe the witch was going to eat them after all. Hylda supposes they must have met her sister, Agatha, who really did eat people. Kellan told her that they shoved Agatha into her own cauldron. Hylda, however, doesn't seem bothered. She says her sister deserved no less. She used to think she was different from her sisters. They sought power and she only ever wanted to be alone. The witch bore them no ill will, but Ruby was hard to convince. She offers 2 more gifts to prove her intentions. The first gift was saving their lives. Hylda lifts the frozen crown from her head, giving it to Kellan. He was to hand it over to the kindly lord as proof of her defeat. Ruby argues that she's not defeated if she's still standing, building a giant castle and freezing people to death. Hylda bid them to look outside. Streams of water were already cascading down the walls of ice. Without the crown on her head, the castle began to melt. Kellan sets the crown on his lap, thinking how brave Hylda must be to set that kind of power aside. The last gift was information. She told them that the witches did not create the Wicked Slumber alone, it was beyond their power. When the Phyrexian invaders arrived on Eldraine, they each had their own ideas about how to handle them. Talion was the one who decided Yrith's sleeping curse was the surest way, but the 3 witches were not powerful enough to cast the spell. There were 4 of them once, but one died 20 years ago, so Talion offered to help, along with a boon the Fae were famous for offering. From the stories gifted to Rowan by Yrith, it was clear this 4th sister, this 4th witch, was none other than Will and Rowan's biological mother. The Wicked Slumber was only meant to stop the invaders. That it spiraled out of control was Yrith's doing. She leapt at the chance to have all those people at her beck and call. She probably would have done it even without the boon the kindly Lord offered. But Kellan was supposed to be on a heroic quest. He thought he was doing the right thing, but it was Talion, his lord, who caused this? Hylda assures him that he is doing what is right, only that he's cleaning up the mess the 4 of them made. Kellan trembles, thinking about how the Fae aren't supposed to lie. Kellan picks up the crown and storms out of the room, down the spiral stairs, blood rushing through his ears. When he arrives outside, he sees a Fae portal and reaches for the door. Ruby grabs his wrists and reminds him that they were going to do this together. Kellan nods, and they walk through the portal. In the land of the Fae, the 2 heroes stride, walking amongst the land of false castles and false hopes. Talion awaits, draped on their throne like always. Kellan throws the crown at Talion's feet, accusing them of lying. The kindly Lord says his father's spirit is finally shining through, and sits up in their seat to explain. The Fae do not lie. If they did, their blood would clot like spoiled milk. Ruby told Talion that they knew about the curse. They knew that they had been used. The kindly Lord asks if it's such a bad thing to be used for a noble cause. It wasn't the same to Kellan. The Fae Lord asked if he was pure of heart, and promised to give him information about his father. It was shameful to break down and cry like this, yet Kellan couldn't stop the tears from flowing. Foolishly, he believed Talion. He believed he really knew his father. Talion argued that they did know Kellan's father, and they would still tell him once they finished this quest. Or would Kellan really not save the realm because he didn't like the reason it was being saved? Kellan needed to find Yrith at Castle Ardenvale and defeat her to end the curse. Or he could return to his pastoral home and never again feel the belonging that the Fae world offered him. Talion waves a wand and the world flickers around them. Once more, they stand on the cliffs outside Hylda's castle, and Kellan begins to weep. And there you guys have it, Chapter 4 of Wilds of Eldraine's story. So we learned more about the mysterious origins of the Wicked Slumber. It looks like maybe an outsider aided them in its crafting, and that it was initially intended to just impact the Phyrexians. Talion being the orchestrator of this spell comes as a heavy blow to Kellan, but Yrith's lust for power got the better of her, and she was the one, along with Ashiok, to cause the spell to run rampant. Kellan, of course, is devastated that his lord actually helped craft this curse. That he omitted this feels wrong to him. He doesn't feel like he's on a noble quest anymore. Of course, if he ends the curse and saves Eldraine, what's the difference? A true hero may know the difference. Either way, the path forward is clear. They must go to Castle Ardenvale and face Yrith. Only problem is, she now has Ashiok and Rowan on her side. Anyway, that's going to do it for today's video, everyone. I want to thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed the content here, please consider supporting us by leaving this video a like, sharing it with friends, dropping a super thanks, and becoming a subscriber. It all goes a long way in helping the channel grow. And until next time, guys, see ya!